Hi, Mark Cork here from Boat US magazine. Today I'm going to show you how to repair a large area of jar coat by using a disposable sprayer. So before I get started, I'm going to wash this down, but the whole reason for this repair is the fact that there is a previous repair here. I can see it close up. You probably can't see it on the camera, but what I want to do is sand this down again, spray this so it matches the surrounding jar coat, and it's far easier to do that with a disposable sprayer than trying to do it with a brush. So the first step is to use good boat soap and some water to wash the area down. That'll get any surface dirt off there. So with the soapy business finished, I'm just going to rinse it down with some clean water just to get the soap off the surface. With the rinsing out of the way, next step, just to dry it off. I'll wipe up as much as I can with a rag, then I've got to leave it to air dry. Safety is very important, so you'll notice I'm wearing safety glasses, I've got disposable gloves on, and I'm wearing an overall because I don't want to get this acetone all over myself. Also, when I come to actually doing the fiberglass work, I'll be wearing a respirator. So before we mask off, I'm going to wipe down the area with acetone just to get any remaining contaminants off there, any wax or detergent that's left over from the wash. So we don't get gel coat everywhere, I'm putting plenty of plastic down, painter's tape, masking off the area so that any overspray doesn't go on my boat, and it doesn't go on the deck or on the handrail, and more importantly I want to make sure that I don't get any blowing off to the boat next door. There we are, that should do it. Looks nice. Incidentally, here's a really handy tip. If you're using masking tape, keep it in a Ziploc bag. Then that way, when you put it down, you don't pick up dirt on the edge. So if you're painting anything, you get a nice sharp edge without any fluffy bits on it. Before we actually apply any gel coat, the next thing is just to give it a quick rub down with some wet and dry paper, used wet. This is 400 grit, and all that does, it just gives a bit of tooth or bit of bite for the gel coat to actually attach. You'll notice that I'm using a block, and that keeps it nice and flat against here so we don't put any ridges in the gel coat. We're just going to wipe this down with some nice clean water and then let that air dry, and we'll be good to go. We get loads of questions about should I use waxed or unwaxed gel coat. I'm using waxed gel coat, but either will work. The difference is that if I use waxed gel coat, the wax floats to the surface as it dries, keeps out the air and allows it to harden. If you're using unwaxed, that won't happen, and you've either got to cover it with something or cover it with PVA, which will exclude the air and allow it to harden. The gel coat I'm using is pre-coloured to match my boat. It's obviously Spectrum Colour, that's just one manufacturer, there's lots of others. But if you go to the website, you can buy it for almost any boat pre-coloured, so it'll match your gel coat precisely. One of the main things that we need to do when we're spraying gel coat is obviously have some kind of sprayer. Now if you're doing a large area, you would use a compressor, and we're not at that stage. We're going to do a really small repair, and for that I'm going to use a Preval sprayer. These are great, you can buy these almost at any hardware store, and essentially it's a can of propellant with a glass jar. I'm going to put gel coat in there, and then that will obviously spray that onto the boat. So now we're ready to mix things up. I'm obviously going to use the gel coat, and I'm going to use 5 ounces of gel coat, which should be enough for my repair. Obviously I've got to catalyse that, which is this stuff, and then I'm going to reduce it with styrene. In other words, I'm going to thin it slightly so that it comes out through the spray gun easily. Once I've mixed all the components together, I'm going to put it in the glass jar, then we can go around to the side of the boat and spray it. So I've let the gel coat cure and it's nice and hard now. And next thing is to remove the masking so that I can then sand it and feather the edges in so it'll match in seamlessly with its surrounding gel coat. So we've taken off the masking and already it's starting to look pretty good, but we're not finished yet. To make it blend in with the surrounding area, I'm going to use some 600 grit wet and dry, used wet, wrapped around a block. And I can use a fine paper because spraying the gel coat already gives you a smooth finish, so we don't need to be too aggressive with this. So that all feels really good. It's all nice and smooth. There's no bumps or hollows or anything in that now, so we're almost complete. Wipe off the sanding residue with a clean, damp cloth. The next stage, after we've sanded it and it's nice and smooth and it's looking good, we're going to put some rubbing compound on here. I use 3M marine rubbing compound. It's basically just an abrasive but in liquid form, so we put some of that on a rag. Some people use the rubbing compound and directly on the pad, and I can do that, and I do that when I'm doing large areas, but for small areas I tend to use a rag because it doesn't fling the stuff everywhere. So the next step after we've rubbed on the compound is to use my slow speed buffer. This has got a variable speed and I'm going to be running this at about 1,000 revolutions per minute, and you'll also notice I've got a yellow buffing pad on here, so it's not too aggressive because I don't want to take too much off. But I'm just going to polish this with this now. With the compounding out of the way, the next stage is to use a glazed, and we get loads of questions about this, but this is basically a very, very fine polish. It's still slightly abrasive, but it's a fine polish. This will put a nice shine on here. I'm going to add a little bit with my cloth, and then before that dries I'm going to pick up my buffer again, and I'm still using the same pad but I've reversed it so that I've got a nice clean surface, not using the side that had the compound on. So I'm using the buffer at the same speed as I did for the compound, and we don't want to go too fast. Now that's looking pretty good now. It's nice and shiny and it's blending in much better with the existing gel coat. The final stage is to use a nice wax to protect the polish that we've just put on. I like to use Colonite fiberglass boat wax. There's plenty of others, but this is my preferred choice and I've always had good results with this. So I'm going to apply this by hand. The last stage is I like to polish this off by hand. You can use a buffer, but I like to do it with a microfiber cloth. In case you're wondering what tools and materials we used, I'm going to put those in the description so you can find those yourself. Anyway, I hope you learnt something here today, and I'd like to thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the water.